Hi, everyone, and welcome to Awaken to Rise, where we are teaching you how to reawaken and reconnect to your ancient feminine wisdom. I am excited to be with Anodea Judith today as we talk about She Rises, awakening our female archetypes of leadership and how this applies to our spiritual practices. Welcome, Anodea. So glad to have you today.
Thank you, Patti. I'm delighted to be here and talking about this. Today kicks off Women's History Month, so it's perfect.
Oh, wonderful. So do you want to tell us a little bit about She Rises and how it came about?
Yeah, as a psychologist and a workshop presenter and a writer, I have researched a lot of women's history, of mythology, of archetypal psychology, and put it all together. And this has been working in me for years about how women lead differently than men do. And often, I've taught some courses on leadership, and the women kind of shy away from it and go, oh, that's something for CEOs and kings and presidents. I'm not really that, unless you're running for office, you kind of don't identify that way. But what I found is that women lead differently than men. They need different archetypes to guide them. And so this kept working in me, and I was looking at why Hillary didn't win. Hillary Clinton didn't win in 2016, like she was the nasty woman if she was masculine, or she didn't have what it takes to be commander in chief. And it's this unholy choice that women have to act like a man for leadership or be left behind. And I realized that the women's archetypes of leadership have not been recognized or acknowledged. And so I set about making this set of cards on archetypes. And this was during the pandemic when everything that was in my traveling workshops was, shut down. And, the cards are rather large, and you open them up, and it tells the story of that archetype from the perspective of I, which is kind of like a poem of the archetype speaking directly. She, which is the history or the story of that archetype, sort of like the intellectual information about her. And then the you, which is advice for the person working with that archetype. When you get the card of the midwife, you may be pregnant with possibility and trying to give it birth, so it's different for each one of those. And there's 38 archetypes in all. And so I just came out with this with a launch in early December. And that commemorated my 70th birthday. And I decided I'm going to have a bit party of having my friends enact these archetypes on stage with live music and lights and costumes. And it was great fun. And now I'm doing workshops on the archetypes.
Amazing. Did you have something you wanted to share with us about that on stage?
Yeah, I can share one that is the alchemist, because I know you talk about alchemy quite a bit. And alchemy was an ancient spiritual discipline that involved a psychological journey toward higher consciousness, toward what was the philosopher's gold. That was the goal. And you went through the darkness of facing your shadow, and then you went through the burning up of all your blockages, and then you went through the purification, and you went through the conjunction of opposites. And it was a whole process of really spiritual practice to awaken to higher states and work through your stuff to, find the pure gold of higher consciousness. And so this is the I poem, and that's what each of these people enacted. And this is the alchemist. So I will share my screen, and
thank you.
We will go with it. There, you seeing the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Looks good.
So I had just introduced her.
I am the alchemist. I am the blender of the elements to transform the mundane into the elixir of immortality. I am the alchemist, knitting together seamlessly the puzzle pieces of reality. I am the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. I am the alchemist. I am the lengthy preparation that makes for quick work. Without me, you would be ordinary. But with me, you can fly to the height of your grandest dreams effortlessly when the time is right. You can't always see me, but you know when I am present. I bring that secret ingredient, that no one knows is missing until they find it. I am the spark of life in all creation. I seek the highest purpose, the purest vibration, the ultimate awakening. I take you to pure gold. I take you to pure gold.
We embrace.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, after each archetype, the whole audience said, welcome, whatever it is, we embrace you.
Now, when we talk about archetypes, how many or what knowing about these archetypes helps women? I mean,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It helps women recognize aspects of themselves that may have been unacknowledged. For instance, one of them is the shepherdess. Now, the shepherdess doesn't lead like a man, being the battle sergeant leading men into battle from the front. She's the one that is busy making sure everybody gets a call back and they get the meeting minutes, and that they've had enough to, have you had enough water, and make sure that the lagging student gets the extra attention he needs, and the person that's left out gets, included. They're bringing everything up from the rear. And it's really an important form of leadership, but because it's not out in front like a man, it's not considered leadership. So for instance, one woman, when she worked with that archetype in one of my circles, she said, oh, I've been doing this all my life.
Mhm.
And I never saw it I just took it for granted. I never saw it as a form of leadership. And so it's looking at all these different ways that women serve. So the alchemist is like the cook. She's the event planner that just gets just the right people to come to the dinner party. So there's a certain alchemy. She, might be the artist. There's a way that women serve as this, and it's often behind the scenes and not acknowledged.
Right. And what's the difference between archetype and stereotype?
Well, what we have in this world often is a stereotype, which is an archetype stripped of its depth. So, the sexy woman on the magazine cover is a stereotype. She's always skinny, usually blonde, heavily made up, skimpy clothing. But really, it's the archetype of the lover, which has so much more dimension. The guy in the gray flannel suit is the businessman. That's a stereotype. But the entrepreneur is an archetype, right? So when archetypes are stripped of their depth and they have both light and shadow, and when they're only seen in one way, then they become stereotypical, where it doesn't have any variation in the form. But archetypes are powerful. We tap into them and we tap into their power.
Right. And so the best way for women to use these cards, so that how do they get that understanding, and how they learn about their archetypes from using your cards?
Well, it's all written on the card.
Yeah.
And so the way I've been doing it is I've been conducting circles and evening presentations where I put the cards out and people pick one, either one that they resonate with, that might be, give them advice on a problem they're struggling with at this time, or they pick one that's very different, very unfamiliar, because there's a lot to learn there. And they
Mm-hmm.
take it back to their seat and they read it through. They read the I, the she, and the you. So they learn about her and they look at, how does this apply to me? And then I do a process of meditation and communion with this archetype. And then I have each woman stand up and read the I part, the way the alchemist just did. And something happens inside. And I was very surprised when I first started doing this. I just thought this was a nice way to write the book. I wasn't even going to put it all on the card at that time. But the reason I have is if it's in a book, then everybody has to wait for their turn to read the book, when they take
Right.
the card. This way they can take it back to their seat. They can read it. They can take it home. They can put it on their altar. They can tape the image to their mirror and read about it every day. They can memorize the poem. There's a way that they can work with it that actually activates that power in a woman, and she starts to see herself differently.
Yeah. You also we talked earlier before about that this makes a difference not only in a woman's life, but also in the world at large. So could you explain a little bit about that?
I think that I forgot to stop
Yeah.
share here. That this is when women start to see themselves in their natural powers and look at how those powers have been undermined through history or how they're standing in the world today. For instance, the creatrix, which is basically the artist.
Right.
As I was researching that, 87% of all the works in museums, in art museums, is done by men.
Men.
Only
Mm-hmm.
13% by women. Yet women get 60 or to 65% of the MBA, Masters in Fine Arts, MFAs, and yet are only 25% of exhibitors in shows, across the country, and only 13% in museums. So when we start to understand how these powers of creativity, these powers, the midwife, when midwives were undermined by, obstetrical interference, there was a guy, Dr. Robert DeLee, who came out in 1915 and said, midwives are useless. We need to use forceps and ether and things like that. Death to mothers and infants went up 41% over the next 15 years.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
After he undermined the validity of the midwives. So as we reclaim this, we reclaim our power, and this is women rising.
And I think that's what's so important today.
Yes.
That we're at that point. We need to take back that and get back in touch with those things, back in touch with our archetypes, correct?
Exactly. And women have made great strides in, working their way into government and business and, positions of some power, but in actual leadership, they still lag way behind. That progress has not made as much gain. And I think it's because we don't know what women's leadership looks like, because it's very different from men. And the women who do go into leadership, they often get burned out because they're trying to do it the way men do it, which is dictatorial and very certain and,
Right.
command and control. And that's really not the way women work. That's not the way women's power works. Women tend to want to benefit others.
Correct. Right. I can see that. No. So what else I wanted to ask you about that? So no, I know it's very important these days for women to recognize, that, and I think we're being called to stand up and start taking the leadership again.
Yes.
Because we have been so repressed.
That's right. Yeah. And, the world is not going to change dramatically if we don't have more women leaders.
Absolutely.
There was a study in a book called The Athena Doctrine, written by two men, and they were sociologists, and they interviewed 64,000 people. They had a whole questionnaire in 13 different countries, and over a period of years about, what would make the world better and what would you like to see in your government and in your workplace and in your bosses and things like that. And the conclusion these two men came to is that 66% of the world believes that it would be better off if men thought more like women. And that was their very words.
Their conclusion.
But it was basically, if there was more equality, if there was more acceptance of diversity, if there was more cooperation, if there was more compassion, things that women tend to lead in and lead with, So, another one of my archetypes is the mother of compassion, or the angel of mercy. And I talk about how women have been leading the compassion revolution. Another one is the trailblazer, and
Yeah.
activist. So, the trailblazer stands on the shoulders of many other women that have gone before. And here we learn about some of the women trailblazers. So it's really important to understand our women's history. That's why we have Women's History Month starting today. And
Right.
to give us more sense of, yeah, I do that. I do that naturally.
Right. What would you say to our women today to have that call out to them, and why it's so important that they start to discover their power again, their archetype gifts?
Well, I think that, like I say, women have made many strides,
Right.
but we haven't changed the conversation yet. And what is missing is women's values in the conversation. So we've made many strides in entering into the male workplace. And, this is not to put down men in any way.
Right.
That's not what I'm about. In fact, a lot of men have come to these circles and had very profound experiences. And what men have done is given us a lot. It's given us a beautiful world of many, many things, computers and airports and airplanes and stereos and automobiles and things that, have largely been created by men. And we're grateful for that. But in the process, sometimes I say men have a thing and women have a place. And
It's like bringing that balance back, right?
That's right.
With the different
Men
energies.
have given us marvelous things, but they've trashed the place. And so now we need to bring up the feminine values to be part of the conversation of where we are in the world, to unite with the masculine values and work in partnership toward creating a new world that's better for all.
Yes, so agree. So agree. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd want to share that we didn't cover today?
Well, my vision for this is creating a movement, and I have a website, sherisesmovement.com. A movement of women rising everywhere. And this came to me after I did the live event, and everybody just loved it and talked about it and talked about it a lot, and where can we do this more in different cities. And so what I'm doing is, one level is just experiencing the cards by reading them and enacting them and speaking them out loud. Another one is training women to lead those kind of circles where they can even make some money at it and conduct these circles and get other people. And then that would be the She Rises Leadership Circle. And then the She Rises Visionary Circle would be putting on live events, taking this into corporation, taking it into the schools, and helping this movement catalyze women rising and awakening everywhere.
Wow, I love it. What a great inspiration to get out there. I so on board with what you're saying. And so that kind of leads me to, so you have a free gift for everyone today. If you want to tell them a little bit about that.
You saw a little snippet of the live performance, but I can offer the whole movie of the performance, which goes through 17 different archetypes plus one man. And that's on YouTube and available to anyone. And I can put it in the chat if you like.
Sure.
And you can put this out to your audience. There we go. And that's the link for the full-length movie of the live event.
Perfect. I got it. Oh, wonderful. And one other thing I forgot to ask you, I wanted to touch on, was how do these archetypes work with the men? How they benefit from it?
So I was surprised, when I started this project, I was writing it for women with women in mind. And as I started to share it, women brought it home to their partners or whatever, and they said, I want to bring so-and-so to the circle. And so I said, okay, that's fine. So we had men come, and then they'd pick a card and they would read it. And men can look at this either as reclaiming a feminine part of themselves, because men don't have much room in their expectations of leadership. Some men might be shepherds as well, that want to shepherd and help people along rather than lead out front. And so I found, men just would shake and they would cry and they would have these powerful experiences. So it's either reclaiming the feminine in themselves, or learning about this so they can recognize it in the women around them.
Right.
Or some would even change the pronoun to a he, and it would work that way.
Wow. That's powerful too, because
Yeah,
it is the
it
men recognizing the feminine in them and us
Yes.
coming together.
Exactly.
So
Because
I
these are
agree.
really universal archetypes. But, some like the priestess or the oracle, they're ancient archetypes that have largely been lost, or the midwife. Some are just emerging, like the activist and the trailblazer. I mean, in the activism movement, 60% is women, or the yogini, she's a kind of leader that is the yoga teacher taking people on a spiritual journey. This is more modern and emerging. And then some are like the mother or the grandmother that we have always had, but we kind of take for granted.
Right. Oh, well, thank you so much. You've given us so much today, so much to
Okay.
think about and alternatives or a way to look in our lives. So anyways, thank you so much for joining us today. It was
You're welcome.
so nice speaking with you.
You can go to sherisesmovement.com to learn more.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Patti.